About what our goals are and our more or less our position on our on-site wastewater management here in the state. So what, first off, Sand Services does, our role, to let you know, we don't simply do wastewater work. So the sanitarians in the local offices, field sanitarians, are out there doing a lot. First of all, we've got specialty programs, beach monitoring. I am the administrator over a few of these programs, buildings and premises, disease vector control, infectious waste, retail food, and on-site wastewater. Some of these others are specialty programs, commercial seafood, milk and dairy, so forth. But just to present to you that we do cover a lot within Sand Services, and what our goal is here is to reduce risks, more or less, with potential environmental hazards. With on-site wastewater in mind, we want to prevent untreated or improperly treated sewage from being discharged into the environment, regulate and license manufacturers, sub-manufacturers, and installers of wastewater systems throughout the state of Louisiana, ensure that wastewater is treated to appropriate levels, as Mr. Piku suggested earlier, with the limited ability to test something like a spray irrigation system in the case we were discussing earlier. But because of our approval of the use of a system that's gone through the ANSI approval system, right, you would assume that that system is meeting those standards. Is that the case? Maybe not always, if what we talked about also, the maintenance of that system isn't upkept. If we start having problems, if the skimmer's not set right and it's not doing its job, well, you're going to have one thing leading to another, and these systems are like any other systems. You're an engineer, right? So you know as well as anybody, input and output, right? If one thing messed up, it's going to mess up the chain. So anyway, I'm not teaching you guys anything you don't know. And we want to create uniformity according to the Louisiana Administrative Code using Sanitary Code Title 51, Part 13 in this particular case when it comes to on-site wastewater. We do have overlapping roles with multiple agencies and governments. As you can see, when it comes to sizing and permitting 3,000 gallons per day and under, that's going to fall into Sand Services. When you go to LDH engineering, it's 3,000 and above. We actually help each other out when it comes to complaints, for instance. Somebody files a complaint, one of the very first things that we do is we want to find out, well, who's going to go out and have the authority to go and regulate this complaint or follow through with the compliance on it. And I like to teach and educate newer sands that, hey, your files are there for a reason. Open up the files, utilize DEQ's EDMS website, right, if it's larger systems, and hey, you can go back just by trial and error. Hey, it's not if you're not with DEQ, I guess I should say, with my experience, it's not the easiest thing to maneuver until you've had some experience doing it. I usually just go to the very end. If there's 200 documents, I go to the end. That's the oldest document. It's about 3 or 4 up. It's the one with the most pages. Go to that one and then go to the third to last page, and it's usually where you're going to find what size sewer system that was approved for. That's just my method. I have a few different ways of trying to get the answer to certain things. DEQ obviously handles the discharge permitting, and so we get calls sometimes from DEQ. I'm sure sanitarians I have called DEQ, so there's that collaborative partnership there. Parish governments, I mean, that's without say. all of our parishes. I mean, we're in parish buildings in most places, hand in hand with the president's office, planning and development, and we're able to have that collaborative relationship. I think in my earlier experiences in my career, I would be over in planning and development. It's easier just for me to walk across the hall and go, hey, so that relationship is there, and we like to promote that within our field sanitarians and those local offices. I'm sure you guys experience that here in Ascension Parish. Who's Ascension Parish government?
Me.
Just you, Ascension Parish government.
Nobody else wants to come. I mean, our director came to work, but for about half the time, that was it.
Well, good. I'm glad you're here. Because we do have a good relation. I mean, you have a good relationship with sanitarians in Ascension Parish, I guess I should ask?
Oh, yeah, they have right over there. I mean,
Yeah.
they made a move over across the street, but they in this building right now.
They come and talk to you quite often, or
Yeah,
reach out to you on certain stuff? Good, good. All right, so I always love this slide. It's a way of putting things in perspective. But my first effort was to understand how big a 154-acre lake would be. And so I started looking up different lakes, and I like the way that Maurepas Lake is added there at the end. You might like that. That's an analogy. So approximately we're looking at about 500,000 on-site wastewater systems permitted in Louisiana since 1980. Average flow, 300 gallons per day per system. Total volume, 150 million gallons of wastewater per day. Enough water to fill a 154-acre lake. 1 year's time, 54.75 billion gallons of wastewater, billions. Enough water to fill 56,320 acre lake, or 88 square miles in 1 year's time. And Maurepas Lake, for relationship, would be filled in 1 year's time with just effluent wastewater discharge, which is an astonishing thought. We do have parish ordinances. We do have a few parishes that chose not to have ordinances that can have a play there when it comes to, for instance, just off the top of my head, lot size requirements. If you have an ordinance, you're allowed to have 60 foot of road frontage and a 12,000 square foot lot, where if you did not have an ordinance like some of these parishes, obviously you're going to have to meet the larger lot size of 22,500 square feet and 125 foot of road frontage. There's more to it than just that, but that's just one example of, a parish has an ordinance, and we've got 57 ordinances, as you probably well know, can be more stringent than the state code. State code is minimum. So there are many parishes that have a 12,000 square foot lot size, for instance, as the minimum statewide, but you can go to multiple parishes. I don't know. Do you know the lot size requirement minimum here in Ascension? I know Livingston Parish has a 16,000, or they did change it. And some
issues coming up about a new development they're trying to do.
Across like 4-H Club Road, is that?
That's one of them, and the other one's off of 444 and Jack Allen. And I guess technically Frank Settlement. So yeah, that's where they were trying to come in and take an acre and put 6 houses or whatever. Yeah.
On a single lot, a 1 acre lot, right.
It's unbelievable what they're trying to do. Yeah, think about it. In a rural area where everybody lives on 5 acre minimum pieces of property.
I thought that when I read the number, the size of the development that I saw, the numbers, like a couple years ago, or a year or a little more ago, someone brought it to me and said, "Hey, take a look at this." It's like, oh my gosh, what are they developing? A small city? Has anybody here seen those numbers? It was insane. Just
School can't handle it, the road can't.
yeah. They'd have to build schools for that whole subdivision.
Against the actual parish government.
Yeah.
They didn't see the developer or the builder. They decided to see the parish.
Nah. So obviously ordinance are going to vary from parish to parish. There's no set way that they do it. The local governments decide lot size, discharge points, change of ownership, etc. It makes uniformity obviously a challenge statewide. On-site wastewater permitting process. So the steps there are that they're going to produce an application and a plans review will take place. We go out and do a site survey on all of these. We issue a temporary permit, and then certification by installer is then supplied back to us from the installer once the installation takes place, and that's when we issue that final permit. With permits in mind, the certification by installer has to be submitted within 15 days after completion of the installation. Mechanical sewage treatment plants that use electrical power may require a properly installed ground fault current interrupter. The Office of Public Health, though, on that topic, doesn't have the authority to inspect or approve electrical outlets. I will tell you right now, I have definitely been personally out doing an inspection on an installed sewer system, and you walk up and there's the wire to the aerator wrapped up right there, and we're like, well, there's no electrical outlet. That falls on the homeowner, not the installer. Most installers make sure that that work is done before walking away from the job. I say most loosely, in my experience anyway, but it isn't their responsibility. It is the homeowner's responsibility. When it's not,
before it's approved?
Say it again.
Are they actually required to have
Yes.
electrical outlet before it's approved?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, that is correct. And so that can be a little bit of a gray area, though, because I believe we'll cover it here in just a minute. So I'm just going to keep going there, but I think we're going to address that in just a second here. Plans and specifications for the installation with proper electrical connections have to be made so the air pump can be running. A final permit approving the installation is issued only upon verification that the individual sewage system has been installed in compliance with this code. On-site inspection conducted by a representative of the state health officer and or the form of a completed certification. So I will point out to you this right here. And or, okay, so reading that again, on-site inspection conducted by a representative of the state health officer and or in the form of a completed certification by installer. So there's a lot of times where that certification that was presented by the installer, because remember, that certification is saying system is in working order. The installer is responsible to make sure that system is in working order, so he cannot give us a certification by installer paperwork without an electrical outlet, it plugged in, and he sees that sewer system is running correctly with the aerator, right? Plugged in and running correctly with electricity. So
the outfall and looking at where the outfall goes?
Everything from the discharge from the house or the structure to the discharge pipe, including if it needs a backflow preventer. All right, so, and everything in between, that is the responsibility of the installer. And if we get that paperwork and we don't inspect every single sewer system out there, do what's called a final inspection. All right, we do permit by certification, and we do permit by verification. A permit by verification means that a sanitarian went out there after the installation and did an actual inspection of that sewer system. And in our permitting program, computer program, we can go in there and see, was this permitted by verification a visual inspection, or was it permitted by certification, meaning we accepted that certification by installer? I will tell you that the example I gave you, we received the certification by installer and there's no electrical outlet. We would go back then on that installer and either do a verbal communication with him and get this thing corrected right away. Again, it being the homeowner's responsibility, but the installer for turning in this paperwork is also in violation. So they need to get together and make sure this is done so he can then sign or she can sign a certification by installer that would be legal at that point.
If the installer, occasionally if you just basically certifies it and it's not really up to par, what happens to them?
Usually a violation letter would be written, and that violation letter would include how he was in violation, or she. There are many ways an installation can go bad. One of the worst, in my opinion, is installing a sewer system and then the discharge pipe has to go uphill to the ditch. Water doesn't flow uphill. So that doesn't happen every day, but that's an example of what you're asking. You know, we would see that, shoot grades. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that water doesn't flow uphill. That's a violation, and we would note it correctly in the code. They would have to correct that violation before, moving forward.
I mean, what is the punishment to that inspector? Like if you have an inspector who repeatedly doesn't do...
You mean an installer?
I mean, yeah, the installer who's acting as the inspector.
There are compliance measures to be taken. They're ultimately licensed by us. So to answer your question, bottom line is their license would be revoked, right? Possibly, and that would take time. We're not trying to put anybody out of business. We want to work with them and create good installers, right? Because maybe they had, a poor mentor. Right? But with proper training, then we can help develop a good installer, to have a flourishing business, number one, and also install sewer systems that are in compliance with the code, and ultimately, protecting public health. Let's see what this last note part is. Via certification, installers become agents. There you go, right there, and have a duty to the public. That kind of encompasses what we just discussed. Individual on-site wastewater systems. There are septic tanks with field lines, septic tank with oxidation pond, aerobic treatment units, non-waterborne systems, and limited use systems. And you can see over here that obviously you don't even really see a section for non-waterborne, so that's something that you don't come across every day. I've been to some, is it the Boy Scouts of America had a camp, and there were outhouses there, and there were certain regulations that are followed in those cases. But I don't even know if they're being used anymore. It's so outdated, in my opinion. Are there still some in Louisiana? Probably. But we're in most cases, we're using these ATUs. But to point out, the preferred method of treatment for wastewater is always going to be a septic tank with field lines. Buried, right? Can't do it around. I don't know anywhere around here that we can do it. In probably Ascension, in Livingston. You got to get up into the watermelon country, like Washington Parish, right? Sandy soils, really perking. Sabine River has some sandy soils along there.
I had one and it worked great until I built my new house and they required me to put an ATU in, and the water coming out is not as clean as what was coming. Because I had a really good drain field. I'm on the hill.
Right.
But I should have run my treatment plant into the septic tank, and it would have been really clean.
Yeah, definitely.
But parish required me to put an ATU. They wouldn't let me having a septic tank in its drain field.
That was a parish regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been involved with that, been aware of that, you know, where some parishes come around, like if another example would be where there is putting in a community line. Some parishes would say it doesn't matter if you have a functioning ATU or not, you connect to the line. Some parishes would say if you have a functioning system, as long as it's functioning and passes inspection, that you can use that, you don't have to connect, you know, and they allow. You did pay for that system, right? So I guess that's just goes hand in hand with different parishes having different regulations.
There's a state law though that says that if you're within 300 feet of an existing sewer system, you're compelled to tie into it, which means to surrender without a fight.
You sure that's not for the water line?
No, he's right. He's right. He's right. There's a little. There's a little bit of leeway with that as well, right?
You can make some variances, I'm sure.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So the septic tank obviously is based on soil conditions. Sandy, we discussed that. If we've got land availability, oxidation pond is acceptable. ATUs, mechanical treatment plants, again, most common that are being used in the state. Limited use systems, specifically for structures used less than 4 days a week, i.e. 3 days or less, and generates 100 gallons per day or less. And so these are typically your camp units. Enforcement, which is kind of what I believe this to all encompass, right? We want to try to clean up the waterways in the state, and you know, there are other parishes, other areas, other agencies that are working the same goal in different parts of the state, especially in the areas of impaired waterways. When inspections are conducted, we can have inspections post-installation, which we discussed, complaint basis. We get quite a few complaints. We like to have someone fill out a complaint form and make sure that that person is more or less affected by that, and that the complainee understands that we're also going to inspect their sewer system. It says it bold at the top of our complaint form. I think that's a good thing. You know, there would be a tremendous number of frivolous, well, I won't say frivolous, but I'll just say there would be a tremendous number of complaints if it was just able to be taking random phone call. We would be out chasing our tails all day. Prior to electrical releases, if the parish ordinance is in place. That's what we can use to ensure that that sewer system was installed correctly. Enforcement procedures are outlined in Part 1 of the Louisiana Administrative Code, and copies can be downloaded here. And again, I can email this in PDF format, the entire presentation, and so you guys can have that like that if you wanted to get to that part of the code. Procedure overview, notice, reinspection, compliance order, and or additional legal action is necessary. So we treat the homeowner just as though, answering your question a moment ago about the installer. So we're going to, you know, obviously take in the complaint if that's what we're talking about here. We're going to review that and give notice. That's step one. We're going to do a reinspection after a time frame is given. I've given 7 days, I've given 48 hours if it's in certain instances. For instance, retail food service, if you have sewer issues, you got to fix that right away, especially if you got some kind of backup, and you know, we may want that corrected on the spot, depending on what the complaint's about. Most of the time, a premise sewer complaint on a residence would go through this process, and a compliance order would be issued. May need extra time, might be financial. A lot of times people will ask for any kind of grants that may be available. And so we want to work with the residents of Louisiana to make sure that they understand where they can reach, look for resources. Compliance order penalties for non-compliance range from $25 to $100 per day per violation, up to $10,000 per year. Thank you. If you want to email me, that's my email address and my office number.